Okay.
Hey everyone, welcome to another game day edition of the Dan and Joe Sports Show. As always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.
We're joined here on the Rebels' first game day since 2014, Bama, aka the Katy Perry game that Joe and I were both at, and I actually went to that game day with a friend of the show, Spencer, and we decided we'd do a special Dan and Joe game day edition of our show this week. And now we're going to look back on the games that happened last week. And Joe, I thought not what I thought was going to be the biggest game. Nobody thought there was any real implications in this game. Thought it was going to be a snooze fest. But man, LSU and Bama ended up being something. And of course, my brother was at the game.
Yeah, I mean, that was a surprisingly close game, 20-14?
20-14. And Joe, the most surprising stat of that game isn't the final score, it's the number 6. That's how many rushing yards Alabama had in that game. That vaunted Crimson Tide rushing attack had 6 yards against a depleted LSU defense.
Yeah, I mean, my kind of takeaway from it was that we were talking about in the pre-show, Alabama just did not play a good game. It was kind of like a last gasp effort, I felt like, in many ways, from LSU, kind of just them playing a little bit out of their minds, throwing some exotic blitzes and some different coverages, we didn't see all season on defense, but they just weren't able to capitalize, though, on the field position that they had several times in the game.
Yeah, Joe, when you watch Alabama play, usually they'll give you one opportunity in a football game. When they play a team that's got talent that's possible for them to win, they'll give you one chance. If you don't take that one chance, generally they beat your eyes in. They gave LSU 5 or 6 chances to win that game. It was almost like they didn't want to win it. I mean, I've never seen Alabama give a team that's inferior to them that many chances to win a game.
Yeah, I cannot think of an occasion either. And in the fourth quarter, I feel like there were at least 2 chances where LSU had the ball in Alabama territory and they just couldn't do anything.
No, and Joe, I mean, we talked about this a couple weeks ago with the Auburn Ole Miss game where Lane chose to go for it 5 times inside the red zone against Auburn and had an interception and missed 4 fourth downs. And I thought in this game, it came back to bite Coach O. I know he was coaching aggressive. He's got his $17 million. He's got nothing to lose. He was coaching in his mind to win. But with 4.5 minutes left, when there's a number, I quoted you right there, 6 yards. That's what they had given up rushing to Alabama. Bryce Young was a little shook by a pass rush. Why on earth, when you get a huge call reversed in your favor, it's not a fumble, it's an incomplete pass, you got 3 points right there. Cade York is about as automatic of a kicker as there is in college football. Why not take your points and be down 20-17, especially when a minute and a half later they were in the same place?
Right. Yeah, I mean, you do anything for those kind of opportunities later on. Why not take advantage of it in the moment, especially earlier in the game? I feel like it's all about accumulating points and then giving yourself a chance at the end. So, yeah, I'm completely with you there. But I was just so puzzled, as you referenced, with Alabama's rushing statistics. I was looking at the box score right now as we're recording this, and just Brian Robinson only having 18 yards on 13 carries. I mean, that's just so uncharacteristic. And that is kind of one of the weak links of this Alabama team, if they have one, is their running game is just not what it usually is.
No, I mean, Brian Robinson is a very good running back. He's just by no means a great running back. He's not even close to being a great running back. And we expect great running backs to Alabama. I mean, you think about since Saban's been there, it's been just a string of amazing running backs from Mark Ingram to Trent Richardson to Eddie Lacy to Derrick Henry. Alvin Kamara on the bench. I mean, it's just it goes on and on. And Robinson's a guy. He's sat there. I think he's a 5th-year senior. He's sat through all these guys, hasn't gotten a chance to play, and so that told you one of 2 things: either A, he's just really good, and these guys are so great, and he's going to be absorbing all of their talent, all of their coaching. He's going to come out and kill it this year, or just means he just wasn't as good as them, and that's the main reason he was sitting out. And it's just that simple. And I hate to say it because he seems like he's a good kid, but it looks like it's leaning towards he's just not in that same kind of level as these guys.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It kind of reminds me like Georgia, the quarterback that they had that succeeded Matthew Stafford. Was it Joe Cox?
Joe Cox, very similar. Yeah, Joe Cox was a 5th-year senior. had been the backup to Stafford for 3 years. I think he may have been the backup to David Green for a year or two. And he just, he just never got the job.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's the problem with this Alabama team is they don't have that elite running back and they don't have the elite receivers. I think Mechie is a very, very good receiver. And I think Jamison Williams is a really good speedster deep threat, but they don't have any complete receivers on that team, I don't think.
Yeah, they have a couple of guys that would be outstanding number 2 options. Like, I think it's hard to figure out who the number 1 is, and they're kind of lacking that element of the offense.
Yeah, I mean, and they've been so spoiled with Devontae Smith, Calvin Ridley, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Jalen Waddle, and yet again, these are good, very good receivers, but they're not that caliber. And so what we're seeing is a human Alabama team. We're seeing an Alabama team that, don't get me wrong, is still very good, but I legitimately think, Joe, that Georgia is a 20-point better football team than Alabama is this year.
Yeah, I mean, you feel like, everything's just set up perfectly for Georgia. I mean, I'll say this, because of the name on the Alabama jersey, like, I'll never completely dismiss Alabama's chances, but it definitely seems like it would be surprising for them to be able to pull that off.
That's right, Joe. Speaking of surprising, how about the spoiler makers? I love this Purdue team, man. Every week, they've been doing good things for me over on the boats. I've been riding high on playing the Boilermakers this year. They keep doing it. They're winning all these great games. And, Joe, they have their chance to beat their 3rd top 5 team this week. I don't even know if there's another team ever that can say that. Maybe top 10, but 3 top 5 teams. And then what's even crazier is they do all that and they have 3 losses too. I mean, what a crazy team this Purdue team is. And, I mean, the games they've won against the previous top 5 teams, Iowa and Michigan State, they killed them. And last week at Michigan State, I watched that game. They dominated it from the first snap. And I'm just so impressed by Jeff Brom, the secret $7 million man. A lot of people have been making fun of his contract before this season, but shoot, if you're at Purdue and you can beat number 3 Iowa and number 2 Iowa and number 3 Michigan State in 3 weeks, and if you can follow up this week with a win over number 3 Ohio State, dude's worth every bit of the $7 million. But, Joe, the big thing I want to ask you about Purdue isn't Purdue a perfect example of why we need an expanded playoff?
Well, I think so. I mean, it's another example, like the SEC, the Big Ten is just kind of a crowded conference with 4 or 5 teams that are really, really good, if not more. And it's a perfect example of it is every year in March Madness for college basketball or in college baseball, you see teams that finish sometimes 4th or 5th in their conference make it to the Final Four. Mississippi State baseball this year, I mean, I don't think they were in the top 2 of the conference in the regular season. I know they weren't number 1, and yet they go on and win the national championship last season. And so Purdue just represents another example of a team that could easily knock some people off if there was an expanded playoff. And yeah, I have to give credit to, this team with Jeff Brom. He's a guy that the last couple of years wasn't sure what to think about him as the head coach, wasn't sure how the trajectory of the program was going, but my goodness, he's definitely led a sleeping giant this year.
Joe, you got to be interested to see the highs and lows of the Mel Tucker hype train this year, because suddenly it's the biggest thing ever. He beat Michigan. LSU would be a fool not to get him. USC needs to be calling him 24 hours a day. Suddenly, he's a defensive guy. His defense surrendered 540 passing yards to Aiden O'Connell, the Purdue QB.
Yeah, I mean, that just kind of sums it up right there. And I remember before the season started, Drew Brees gave kind of a hype speech to this Purdue team. And he was like telling them how he wanted them to be the first Purdue team since he was there 21 years ago to win the Big Ten. And I was thinking to myself, he's just doing that to try to motivate them. But like when you look at the talent of this team, he wasn't completely that far off.
No, and something else that Purdue has, they don't just have a very good quarterback in O'Connell. They have a showstopper wide receiver in David Bell, who might be better than any of those Alabama receivers I mentioned. If you watch David Bell, he takes over games. And they also have a very good linebacker. And so for Purdue to have these star skill position players is a rare thing. Every now and then they'll get a quarterback like, a Drew Brees, or I think they had another one, Kyle Bowler, that was really good. But for them to have not only that and have the wide receiver is something that's very different.
Yes, yes. And sometimes you'll see him have like a Rondell Moore, but never usually like the quarterback and receiver together.
Yes, exactly. Never together. And so, Joe, I think we'll talk about that one in the next segment, but I'm just so impressed with Purdue. And like I said, I wish we had a 12-team playoff because you'd have to put Purdue in it. I think, Purdue is what they've lost to Wisconsin and Notre Dame. And I don't know what the third loss is off the top of my head. But point is, I mean, if you beat 3 top 5 teams, I can ignore the 3 L's in the loss column. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, without a doubt.
All right, Joe, speaking of a team that's got a lot of losses, but is a lot better than their record, how about Tennessee? I mean, last night I went to a Morgan Wallen concert in Mobile. He's a big Vols fan, and I'm sure he is super excited right now because last week the hype train for Josh Heupel finally had a big stop and celebration and a huge 45-42 win over Kentucky. And what's even more impressive about this game, Joe, is if you look at the stats, there's probably no reason Tennessee should have won that game.
Yes, yes, they were able to knock off, a Kentucky team that's been really good this year. I know Kentucky's lost to State now in Tennessee and then Georgia, but still, I mean, this Kentucky team's been pretty talented, good defensive team, and Tennessee's able to score and to knock them off. And now kind of the litmus test will be, how they perform against Georgia. I mean, not so much as winning the game. I mean, nobody expects them to win the game, but I want to see how competitive they are against Georgia.
Yeah, Joe, I think this is a big opportunity for Tennessee because when you pair the big win they had over Kentucky with Florida's just absolute falling on their face against a bad South Carolina team, not just losing 40-17. This feels like this is a huge chance for Heupel to get to get Tennessee back in the top 2 of the East, positioning for next season. Georgia so far, no one has played them close. I know they beat Clemson by 7, but anybody that watched that game saw that Georgia was a 3-touchdown better football team than Clemson, but they just played it close to the vest. Tennessee has a chance to score real points against Georgia. And if they can go out there and even score 20 or 24 points against this vaunted Georgia defense, lose by 14-17, that's something no one else has really done.
Yes. And that, would bode well for Tennessee and then also kind of encourage some other teams that are going to play Georgia the last couple of weeks of the season.
Absolutely. I think that would just be fantastic. And so I think this is a big opportunity. And on the other side, I mean, what is going on with Dan Mullen, Joe? Did you get to watch any of that South Carolina game? I watched a replay of it. They did an SEC and 60 thing. And the offense just looked pathetic. I mean, it was poor play calling, very predictable runs. He didn't let Emory Jones do anything. And I'm just very concerned about what's happening with Dan Mullen in Florida right now.
Yeah, I did not get to watch the game, but just followed the score and just kind of, an overview of the entire season. They've just been kind of up and down. And some people maybe expected a little bit of a drop off after losing Kyle Trask and Kyle Pitts and all those great receivers. But at the same time, I expected them to absolutely beat, a team like South Carolina going away kind of in the other direction, like the opposite score in Florida's favor. And so I think the thing about Dan Mullen that the pressure is going to build is, is he the type of coach that can consistently lead a program like Florida? He was always great as a coordinator. That was the narrative on him. That was the knock on him, is he's an outstanding offensive coordinator. But can he be the head coach that, is in charge and leads a team to the college football playoff? And that's still yet to be determined.
I think it is. And the question for Dan Mullen, too, is the fit. He's a Northeast guy, but he's not he's not a buttoned up kind of guy. And he's quirky. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He'll rouse up some things. He'll say some controversial statements. He'll show up wearing a Darth Vader outfit to a teleconference after he started a fight. I mean, you take a little bit of, you got to know that Dan's going to be Dan. And the question is, that's all good when you're winning, but that's kind of stuff adds up when you're not doing good. And you combine that with, his failures at recruiting at Florida, and then apparently trying to, control the narrative and not even let media people ask him about recruiting. It's very strange, and I think it's starting to become a pretty toxic situation, I think.
Yeah. Next season is really going to be a pressure-packed year for him to perform.
Yeah, I mean, and I think there's no reason they should fire him. I think they got to give him one more year. But I think, Dan's obviously had to get rid of Grantham, which I'm sure a lot of Florida fans were happy about. Todd Grantham style defense always wears thin eventually. And he had to get rid of a couple other people as well. And so I think that hopefully that's enough for him to keep his job, because I don't think that that's a smart move for Florida to get rid of him. But next season's going to be very telling for him.
Right. That's what I think. I think this year he's fine, but next season he has to improve.
But Joe, on that subject of, it's a good decision to keep someone. I was so happy to see that Nebraska is going to stick with Scott Frost. I think that's the right decision. I know he hasn't won the games, but when you look at them, they are in every game, Joe. It's just like they're an iota away from being a good football team. And that's a culture thing. And maybe he just needs to get a couple guys out of that locker room and get some more inspirational guys in there that can will his team to win in these close games. And I think that for Nebraska, on an organizational standpoint, you gotta give this guy another year. I know that everybody's so quick to snap judgments now. 4 years, you got to get rid of him. But Nebraska was so far behind. It's so tough to recruit there. And you've seen what the guy can do. And he's a hometown kid. He's won the national championship. And I'm just happy they're giving him another chance because, I mean, Joe, they are the best, 6-loss team in America. And they can go out and beat a top 5 team. Like, they could do it. They could go out and beat a top 5 team. They could also lose to a middle of the road team. But they're close enough to me that I think it was the right decision to hold on to him.
Well, I'll say this. I mean, they're not going to necessarily find anybody better at this point. I mean, it'd be hard for them to get someone that could come in there and just, pull off some type of surprise 10-2 season. It seems like they got to kind of build from the ground up. He's definitely going to do that. And I think about, close to home for me, when Ed Orgeron was at Ole Miss, I kept hearing some people say, they obviously wanted to fire him after the 2007 season. But there were there was a minority of people that were like, give him another year or two, and he's just going to get this program really going with the recruiting he's done. And Houston Nutt comes in there and they go 9-4 back-to-back years. And so maybe it wasn't that completely.
Sounds like that's kind of Coach O's guys, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And then after his guys leave town, Houston Nutt suddenly 2-10. So, kind of going into that school of thought, giving Scott Frost another year is probably not a bad idea.
Yeah, and from my understanding is they're doing a little bit of what Michigan did with Harbaugh is they're making him take a pay cut and kind of putting like, you're on notice, dude, you got to get your act together, but we're going to give you another year to do it. And it's worked out good for Michigan this year. And I hope it does the same for Nebraska because I think they are so much closer now than they were when he started.
Yeah, they're definitely trending in a better direction.
That's right. And, the last consideration with it, and I think if you're the higher up in Nebraska, this is the main reason you hold on to him. Do you really want to be in a coaching hiring sweepstakes against LSU and USC and Washington State and TCU? I mean, this is the worst year ever to be out there trying to find a new coach going against the big boys.
Yeah, this is definitely a tough climate for it.
All right. Speaking of tough, Joe, Dr. Bo's performance was pretty tough against Texas A&M. I started calling Bo Nix Dr. Bo and Mr. Nix. I'm sure someone else has said it because he just it's amazing how great he can look some weeks and how utterly pathetic he can look other weeks. I'd gotten back on the Bo Nix bandwagon, Joe. I was so excited about him. Like, he delivered our first win in Baton Rouge in 22 years. I smoked my cigar. I was all excited about it. He looked good in the first half against Ole Miss. He played great on the road against Arkansas. I was thinking, okay, maybe this road thing is done now, And he ruined a fantastic performance by Auburn's defense. Auburn's defense played amazing in that game against Texas A&M. Never gave up a touchdown. We're relentless. We're confusing them. And the offense was a complete disaster against Texas A&M. Couldn't run the football. The receivers were dropping passes again. They were losing balls in the sun. And I just came away so disappointed in the preparation for that game. and Bo Nix, because he frankly cost Auburn the game on 2 plays in a row where he just dropped the ball without any explanation.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, the big thing for Auburn is that they were in the midst of, a very tough schedule. Obviously, the SEC is always going to be tough, but having, to play at A&M after the Ole Miss game, and then you've got a pretty good Mississippi State team coming into town this weekend. That's definitely a tough slate. But, yeah, you're right. I mean, we saw some regression with Bo Nix in the offense last Saturday. Ironically, I was thinking about when you were talking about the first time Auburn had beaten LSU in 22 years. It's been a big year for you as far as your teams breaking those 22-year curses, with the Braves making it to the World Series for the first time since '99 as well. So it's just kind of ironic.
That is weird. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, so had to throw that in there. But yeah, I mean, with A&M, I get their defense is so good. I think I saw a statistic where they're only allowing less than 15 points per game, which is second in the country in scoring defense. But you got to score more than 3 points. And yeah, it's just the regression from the performances we saw from Bo Nix on the road at Arkansas and at LSU a few weeks ago. I mean, this was just the complete antithesis.
It was, Joe. And even in a game where you see the final score 17 points, that's very misleading about what happened in that game. I mean, it was tied going. It was 6-3 going in the fourth quarter, 9-3, and then Bo dropped the football, and that was returned for a touchdown. And that's what started to cause the separation. But Bo missed a wide open guy on a deep throw for a touchdown. That was an easy pass that would have put Auburn up 10-3. And I think the way their defense was playing, that would have been a huge game changer. I can't sit here and say 100% we'd have won, but I'd have put the odds in our favor to win the game if he completed that pass. And that's just, he just didn't make the plays that mattered in that game.
Right. And that's what you always have to do on the road. You got to make those big plays and convert a lot of third downs.
You do. On the converse side, though, Joe, I got to say I'm very impressed with what Jimbo Fisher has done from taking what appeared to be a disastrous season for Texas A&M, where they completely failed to exceed expectations, where they were a team that had preseason, SEC West hopes, outside college football playoff hopes. And suddenly they dropped games to Arkansas and Mississippi State in ugly fashion back-to-back weeks. And it looks like they're down and out. And maybe, I mean, you and I had a segment where we said, is Texas A&M possibly the worst team in the SEC West?
Yeah.
And boom, he goes out and beats Alabama in pretty, commanding fashion. There was nothing weird about that game. They just straight up beat them. And since then, their defense has played excellent. And, they were the better team than Auburn on Saturday. And so I'm very impressed with Jimbo Fisher. And I got to say this because everybody's talking about it. He would be an absolute fool to leave A&M for LSU.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's definitely in a better place. And I'm still surprised he left Florida State for A&M. But, yeah, he does not need to leave A&M at this point.
No, I mean, so it looks like he made the right decision now to leave Florida State. I mean, they're taking a long time to get back to where they were.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But yeah, it's a big win. And, of course, we have a big A&M game tonight that we're going to talk about in just a minute. And Joe, but that was disappointing effort for Auburn. But the good news, if you're an Auburn fan, is there's still a lot ahead of us. And if Ole Miss can pull the big upset tonight, there's still everything ahead of Auburn, at least in terms of the SEC. They can still win the SEC West if Ole Miss is able to get that big win tonight.
That's true.
All right, and we'll talk about that when we come back on our next segment. I want to thank all of our listeners. Joe and I love doing special shows on Saturdays, especially for a big Grove Day. And catch all of our episodes on Spotify. Look up the Dan and Joe Sports Show on Spotify. Follow us on Twitter at DJ Sports Show. And, of course, subscribe to our new YouTube channel, and you can see Joe and I do our shows on YouTube. And as always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.